This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 358 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 2nd of November 2025. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Aaron, surprised I was normal.
Graham.
Good evening.
And Will.
Hello.
What on earth are you on about, Phelim?
Well, for the first time, I met Will and I met Aaron from both podcasts, and Aaron said, "Oh my God, you're so normal." And I was like, I think that's a compliment. I'm not sure.
Okay, Aaron, as I would call him. In my English accent. Anyway, before we get into it, a bit of housekeeping. Linux Matters is leaving the Late Night Linux family. They've decided to do this because they want more creative freedom, which is fair enough. They're going to carry on. It's still going to be their linuxmatters.sh. If you're subscribed to the individual RSS feed, nothing will change for you. But if you subscribe to the Late Night Linux family all episodes feed, or the Patreon feed, then the last episode will be the 11th of November or just before that for patrons. And then after that, it'll only be in their own independent feed. So we wish them all the best, and we'll link to linuxmatters.sh if you need to subscribe to their individual feed. Let's do some news then, regarding Ubuntu Unity and a call for help. This is a post on the Ubuntu discourse from Mike, who is one of the Ubuntu Unity team, but he's not really a developer. And Rudra, the developer, has, I'm not going to say gone AWOL, but seemingly doesn't really have time for the project anymore. And so they didn't do a 25.10 release of Ubuntu Unity. And it's not looking great for the LTS unless people get involved and help them.
Anecdotally, I hear a lot of positivity about Ubuntu Unity, but these kind of projects require a lot of effort and huge respect to the people that have brought it this far. And if you care about Unity, try to get involved. Otherwise, I don't see how it can continue.
Yeah, I see a lot of projects, and it's not just in the Ubuntu ecosystem, it's on the internet generally, where somebody has an idea and they're all enthusiastic about it, and it goes on for a year and they build a small community of followers, and then it becomes work and other things come along and more important things come along, and something has to give, and the hobby project is always the thing that goes first. I think that this is reflective of the time being correct for Unity to say goodbye. Nobody needs it anymore. It's served its purpose. It did very well. And the time is right for it to be put to bed now, once and for all. So I don't think that there are enough people out there, and you need hundreds and hundreds of people to keep a project like Unity going, because you need testers, you need developers, you need all the people to push the right buttons inside the distro. It's a huge amount of effort, and everybody only has a small amount of time. So if you can't keep it going, just do the right thing and shut it down.
I am reluctantly inclined to agree with you, Will. I think that it's stuck on old technologies. There's not that many people interested in it, seemingly. And more importantly, you can recreate Unity with GNOME or Plasma. You can configure both of them to act more or less exactly like Unity. So at this point, maybe it is time for it to shut down, but it's open source. It will never truly die. And if there is the correct level of enthusiasm, then it will live on. But it seems to have got to a crunch point here, a crunch point that I fear XFCE will get to at some point in the not too distant future. But I like to think that maybe XFCE has got more users. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I think ultimately you're right. But if you want to see it continue, then you're going to have to get involved. It's as simple as that. The Python Software Foundation has withdrawn a $1.5 million proposal to the US government grant program. So it was looking good for them getting $1.5 million, but then the paperwork came through, and the paperwork said you're not allowed to do any sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. And so the Python Software Foundation kind of thought, well, that's not going to work, given that's core to our whole mission. And so they had to just turn down this money. which is a very brave thing to do. And I applaud them for it.
Yeah, as you say, that is literally their goal. I mean, that is what it's for. It's trying to get more people involved in coding because it's not going to be any use for the language or tech in general if it's just, the same old people doing it. So you want new people in. And they could have ended up on the hook for paying back money if on a whim it was decided by the US organization that they said, oh no, we don't like what you did there, pay that money back. So that is a very dangerous type of fund to receive money from.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just if there's any DEI stuff in the work that they were specifically getting the grant for. It applied to the whole organization. So, I mean, it was just incompatible. There was just no way they could have done this. And obviously there's people saying, oh, well, you should have just done it. That's a lot of money. But I think that they had no choice in this one, and fair play to them.
Yeah.
All right, a couple of AI-related stories. Fedora agrees policy allowing AI-assisted contributions. And the second one is SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 16, AI-ready long-term support, and SUSE goes agentic. I think they are related, but not at all the same.
But they are both a mistake.
Well, I don't know. Fedora's policy is just clarifying something that they needed to clarify.
Except for the fact they should have clarified the fact that you shouldn't accept AI contributions if you can't attribute the code to being open source to begin with. I think that's a legal nightmare for another day that they could be opening themselves up to.
I fear that you may be correct there, but the policy is pretty clear. You need to be transparent about the fact that you have used AI to assist you. It can't just be code that the AI has spat out. You have to have some understanding of it, and you have to take responsibility for it, I think is the key thing.
Yeah, but I mean, when a patent troll or the like, or the future AI coded troll, whatever the fuck we're going to call it, comes along, I think you could be in trouble. And it would be nicer to be able to go, we have a thing that people have signed to say they haven't used it, because we can't. If there was a LLM that was, say, trained entirely with FOSS software, proper, OSI approved licenses, then yeah, okay, that could be a thing you do. But there isn't, so you shouldn't.
I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Fedora or Red Hat generally could have their own in-house one, which is built entirely on their own code base. And I think that would be a very, very useful tool for their developers to be able to use inside their IDEs to help with straightforward code completion and bug fixing and those sort of basic tasks. I think this is a good policy. I think that this is the way that people will be working going forwards. And Claude, for example, is able to attribute suggestions to open source code now. And so it can point at a similar file and say, oh, it's a bit like this. And if it is licensed correctly, which it knows about, or at least thinks it knows about, it can tell you that it's okay to use it. And so I think that combined with the option of, in the future, probably not very long away, Red Hat having their own AI models built on their own code, I think it's a good idea to get this rule change put in now, or this agreement put in so that people can use these tools, because I think it will accelerate development and it will be good for quality overall.
I don't think it'll be better for quality. It'll certainly be better for speed, but I think it'll just mean more for review. And I think people are going to be getting fairly burnt out pretty quick reviewing all that shite.
Well, there's reviewing, but then there's writing tests and there's running tests and there's fixing tests to do particular things. I think if you had a bug and you fixed the bug in code yourself and you asked an AI to write a test to make sure this doesn't happen in the future and it did it for you, that is good.
Well, I'm much less concerned about the quality of the code. And we're not just talking about code here. We're talking about documentation, potentially even artwork and stuff like that. I'm less concerned about whether these LLMs are any good. I'm much more concerned about the ethics of it. And you look at a project like Elementary OS, for example, and they've got a blanket ban on using any sort of AI. And I think that's mostly about the ethics of it, rather than necessarily whether it's any good or not. And is open source software and free software about ethics? It certainly is to some people. For other people, it's just pure pragmatism. And seemingly, Fedora is coming down on the side of pragmatism here, rather than ethics and all the other stuff that we know is bad about AI.
And it definitely has nothing to do with the fact that they upper sort of levels of IBM have said that this is what they're supposed to sponsor.
Well, how would you feel, Phelim, if they did have an LLM that was trained exclusively on their own in-house code, closed and open?
Well, I mean, I would be okay with the fact that at least it wasn't using, proprietary code in there that they shouldn't, or, various things like that. I still think the level of quality and hallucination is a massive issue that the only way to solve is to review the code with a fine-tooth comb. And I think the problem is then you're almost down to the point where I would rather write some of my own code than have to go through someone else's code, because that's actually harder to do, if you ask me, because you're then trying to compete against the LLM to see has it tricked you or not successfully. I don't know. I think the way that it was used by the curl guy was quite good. So they already had the code written and then used it as a way to check, almost like a spell checker. Do you spot any weird errors here, or, carry bugs or whatever? That was a good idea, because the code you already know and fully understand yourself. You've written it. And then the machine will go, are you sure you haven't fucked up this memory address here or whatever? And then you can go, you're right, I have, or no, that's bollocks, you're wrong. And then check it like a linter and just say, no, that's fine. But you have that whole state of that code in your head. Whereas if you get handed, here's a 2,000 line library, you need to make sure that's not vulnerable. And like, oh, fucking magic. Cheers. That's a harder task, I think.
All right, what about this SUSE thing? Because this is way beyond just allowing AI contributions.
I think there's free crack in Nuremberg at the moment, apparently.
They put it in the water.
Well, when you've got a website called techstrong.ai, which is just, pure AI fanboyism, praising you for being this forward-thinking distro that's baking AI in and agentic stuff into the very foundation of it, and it's going to be, leading the way, and all the other distros are going to have to do this. It's not a great look, is it?
I read this article 2 or 3 times, and I still don't understand what's going on here. I'm absolutely convinced that this article was written by an AI. There's no real analysis or criticism. It's just words, and it doesn't really make any sense to me.
You're saying it's sloppily written.
I particularly like this line. It says, by integrating agentic AI at the OS level, they've planted a flag. Linux isn't just infrastructure, it's intelligence. Fuck off, honestly.
What the fuck does that mean? Nothing.
It means the AI will RM-RF route, absolutely.
I don't know why, but it makes me think of something like the Goonies, where SUSE has come along with us and we managed to open some secret door on the side of a cavern, and SUSE volunteers to go into the darkness on its own, and we kind of let it. And then we carry on with the rest of the movie.
Well, good luck to them is all I can say. They're going to fucking need it. Good news regarding the KDE fundraiser. They reached their goal.
They did. 50,000 euros. They're now upped it to 75 as a stretch, and they're currently at 57,664. So going well. So if you can, go donate, and yeah, hooray.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by 1Password. If you're a security or IT professional, you've got a mountain of assets to protect. Devices, identities, and applications which can add up to a mountain of security risks. Fortunately, you can conquer that mountain with 1Password Extended Access Management. Over half of IT pros say securing SaaS apps is their biggest challenge. Thankfully, Trellica by 1Password can discover and secure access to all your apps, managed or not. Trellica by 1Password inventories every app in use at your company. Then pre-populated app profiles assess SaaS risks, letting you manage access, optimize spend, and enforce security best practices across every app your employees use. Manage shadow IT, securely onboard and offboard employees, and meet compliance goals. Trellica by 1Password provides a complete solution for SaaS access governance, and it's just one of the ways that Extended Access Management helps teams strengthen compliance and security. 1Password's award-winning password manager is trusted by millions of users and over 150,000 businesses, from IBM to Slack. And now they're securing more than just passwords with 1Password Extended Access Management. Plus, 1Password is ISO 27001 certified. With regular third-party audits, 1Password exceeds the standards set by various authorities and is a leader in security. Take the first step to better security for your team by securing credentials and protecting every application, even unmanaged shadow IT. Learn more at onepassword.com/late-night-linux. That's onepassword.com/late-night-linux, all lowercase. We all recently went to the Ubuntu Summit, and thanks to John Seeger, he arranged a sit-down between me and Mark Shuttleworth where we spoke for about 20 minutes. So let's have a listen to that now. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me, Mark.
What a pleasure. Thank you for being here. How are you finding the event?
Yeah, it's great. I love the office. It's very modern.
It really is wonderful to be able to bring people here and kind of get them out of their worlds a little bit.
Yeah. So I've got 2 questions for you. One of them is what you're excited about. But before that, I want to ask you, what are you apprehensive about in the tech world, and what can we do about that?
Well, what I worry about at the moment is balkanization. I worry that there's a sort of a rush to everybody to find their own corner of the room. And, I think we've had sort of decades and decades of shared progress, not just in the open source world, but in the wider sort of technology world by figuring out how to trust each other, how to build confidence in software and hardware that comes from all over the world. So that I find a bit disquieting, right? I think it's going to be very impractical, very, very difficult to progress in a world where everybody feels they have to kind of control everything for themselves. We'll see. We'll have to kind of walk through this storm to see what's on the other side of it. But I do think that's a challenge.
Well, and what do you propose to do about it, I suppose is the question.
Well, I think questions of trust in technology are really, really important. And that comes at 2 levels. One is trust in the technology itself. Do you trust this chip? Do you have reason to trust this chip? And then the other is trust in the people who control that technology and the governments and companies and so on that are part of the supply chain. My view is just that it is better to invest and do the hard work to figure out how to establish trust and how to have a regime, a way of working that you think will do that, rather than to imagine you can't trust anybody and have to redo everything for yourself, right? So at the moment, it almost feels like people are leaping on the opportunity to kind of do everything for themselves. And historically, that's just not been a very productive way to work.
What are you thinking specifically Europe versus America?
Europe, America, China, Europe, the balkanization of the tech stack isn't great for developers. Imagine you're going to make a washing machine in Indonesia that you want to be able to sell in China, and you also want to be selling in Australia. And now people are saying, oh, well, is the chip in that, was that chip made in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Or was that made in China? I think that's going to be an enormous amount of friction that is wasteful. It obviously serves somebody's agenda. It makes somebody rich, it makes somebody smug. But I don't think it really gets to the heart of, can you trust the washing machine?
Yeah.
There's plenty of people who've managed to, make washing machines on the other side of the world do things they shouldn't have done and had nothing to do with controlling the manufacturing site of the chip that was in it, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to trust technology, it's a deeper question than just where was it made? What's the flag on the outside of it?
I mean, to some extent, open source is surely one of the answers to this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, for me, it's profound that, every time I meet organizations and governments and so on that are talking about being sovereign with technology, the entire strategy rests on shared technology, which is open source, right? It's really only possible to dream of that kind of sovereignty if you're able to draw on something that the whole world is contributing to, which again, to me, kind of points to some of the delusion in the balkanization, right? Or the shallow thinking in the balkanization.
Yeah, I mean, open ISAs like RISC-V could kind of help this, right?
I think they are profoundly important steps, right? I do think RISC-V is something that will impact every silicon manufacturer in different ways, perhaps at different times. And it plays in, to a certain extent, to global geopolitical tech strategy. But I think much as Linux, much as open source have transformed the software world, I think open instruction sets like RISC-V will do the same in silicon. We still haven't seen the emergence of a widely used open implementation of the open instruction set,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of, you can get the PDFs that describe what the chip is supposed to do. You can get those, on an open basis, but you can't actually get the design of the chip.
Yeah.
You can, but they tend to be more proof of concept type projects rather than what Linux is today, which is the main thing that most people would expect to be running on a chip.
Is potentially an issue the permissive licensing, which means that people can take the kind of basics of RISC-V and then add their own stuff on top of it.
People get very ideological about permissive versus copyleft versus that thing. And I'll say I have a personal preference for copyleft, but I'm not ideological about it because I think there are natural self-correcting mechanisms. There are points of friction and stress that happen with copyleft, and then people find pragmatic ways to soften those. And there are points of friction and stress with permissive license, like you described. You can get fragmentation. But it turns out that fragmentation is a bit of a cost for everybody, and they tend to then say, oh, well, let's not do that anymore. So, there's a lot of energy that goes into sort of arguing that somebody else is wrong. And for me, that isn't so important, really. I think open copyleft, open permissive, they work.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of companies who have an upstream first policy, what you said there. Because if you kind of aim for everything that you work on to be upstreamed and open source, it makes it just easier for everyone in the long run, and even the company that's writing that code in the first place.
It's absolutely the right destination, right? So at the end of the day, that doesn't only mean that you now have a shared maintenance burden, but I think more importantly, it means you've gone through the kind of quality review process that is intrinsic in getting something upstream into almost any kind of upstream that it's meaningful. So it ends up being better, not just easier to maintain. It ends up, genuinely better. The debate, the arguments, are often sincere in that their intention is to make it better, not to make it more difficult. On the other hand, I've seen people kind of score own goals where they, say, well, until this is upstream, we can't do anything with it. And again, that's just a slightly impractical ideological view of how stuff works, right? Sometimes actually getting 1 million people to use something is the best way to convince upstream that it's working.
Yeah.
And so I think, that should be the North Star for sure. But also, to argue that somebody's wrong just because they haven't upstreamed something is not very tolerant and perhaps not very practical.
All right. So what are you excited about then in the world of Linux and more generally in the world of tech?
Well, I'm super excited about tiny things. I find the edge IoT kind of ambient compute story really, really uplifting because I love inventors and I love eccentrics and I love entrepreneurs, right? And business at scale is impressive. When you see companies do $100 billion deals to build out, multi-$100 billion data center plans and so on. It's all very impressive, but it's sort of a bit like, the gods up on Mount Olympus throwing lightning bolts at each other. It doesn't have much to do with you or me. Whereas if you hear about somebody who's figured out how to keep somebody's indoor plants greener for longer, well, I can relate to that. And people who figure out how to save energy at home or feel more secure at home or take better care of pets and children and so on, I think that's beautiful stuff and very relatable. So unlocking innovation at human scale, in the room, in the home, in the office, at the factory, I find that really, really interesting. A lot of the AI drama has played out at mega scale. It's giant data centers and giant models. I'm, even more interested in what's going to happen when we start to see that approach to piles of numbers changing, your toothbrush and, stuff that your microphone, your watch, stuff that we can all kind of relate to.
Right. And does that explain the drive for snaps then? Because I look at snaps as a technology and it seems particularly suited to edge devices that traditionally have become, well, they get produced and then never updated again. Whereas with snaps, the self-updating mechanism and everything, is that why
That's why they were born, for sure.
Yeah.
A snap is really a container that's designed to be bound to a piece of hardware.
Yeah.
So, in the context of IoT, that really makes sense, right? Here is an app that is supposed to get the microphone and the camera, but shouldn't get the CAN bus. And so snaps are a kind of a way of putting stuff in a container where all of those things, the relationship between two snaps on the system or the relationship between a snap and the hardware that it has access to, they're just beautifully clearly articulated. And so it's super, super rigorous. I think there's a trajectory for that into the desktop, which is, again, a single device construct, right?
Yeah.
But of course, on scale out infrastructure, we have better container stories, right? Docker, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
These are better ways of thinking about sets of containers on sets of machines. But if you're saying, well, I've got this smart toothbrush over here, how many address books do you want on that thing? Well, you only want one and only one, and you want the right one, and you want to make sure that it's there and make sure that, only things that are supposed to get addresses out of it are going to get addresses out of it. Yeah, snaps were born to do that. And for all, Reddit loves to be controversial, to make them controversial, I tend to look at the technical DNA of something and say, look, is anybody really trying to solve this problem harder and better? And if that's not true, then we kind of owe it to the world to keep investing in the best possible solution of that particular problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/LNL. Tailscale is an easy-to-deploy zero-config VPN that allows you to build simple networks across complex infrastructure. Sign up, install Tailscale on the devices you want to connect, and you can get going in a few minutes. Whether you want to connect back to your home LAN while traveling, send backups to a friend's house, or securely access your Kubernetes cluster, Tailscale combines the power of WireGuard with simple installation and configuration for a seamless experience. Tailscale's personal plan is free forever. You'll get up to 100 devices and 3 users at no cost with no credit card required. So support the show and try Tailscale for free today at tailscale.com/LNL. If you'd like to bring Tailscale to work, use code LATENIGHTLINUX for 3 free months of any paid plan. Thousands of companies like Instacart, Hugging Face, and Duolingo have already made the switch. That's code LATENIGHTLINUX. I've taken up enough of your time already, but just a quick question. What are we looking forward to in Ubuntu 26.04, the LTS? Is it just going to be fine-tuning and, all that? Or are we going to see anything big?
Well, security has been a big theme for us. You saw the oxidizing Ubuntu push, and I think we're all really proud of the impact that we've had upstream in catalyzing and enabling and funding, a refresh of the fundamentals of a Linux distro. Not every distro is going to pick that up tomorrow, but someone's got to break the ice. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've got our mojo back in being willing to sort of take a view on the future. Now, I find it indisputable that having your core software built in a way which significantly addresses the biggest category of security problems is worth doing. It is also indisputable that you're going to have issues whenever you're making a major change.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
But to get to the other side of that, there's no doubt that being on the other side of that is a better place from a quality of software, security, resilience point of view.
And do you think that one interim release is enough, though? Because it's quite a big change with the core util stuff. Like, it would have been nicer to have a couple of interims, right?
Yes, but bear in mind that the upstream communities there have been working on that for a good long time. We and other people had been banging on that, right? People who are passionate about that have been running their systems with that for some time.
Yeah.
So in fact, the question is more about the corners of the room than the room itself. And the only way to find those issues is to have millions of people use it. So there comes a point where you sort of need to say, if this is the future, let's deliver it. There's no law that says if you're on 24.04 today, you've got to be on 26.04 tomorrow. In fact, take it when you're ready, right?
Yeah.
There are categories of people who say, I'm a 0.1 kind of person, right?
Well, me.
Right, there
exactly.
you go. So there you go.
Yeah.
There are other people who are like, well, I'll take the release candidate, I'll take the interim. And I think that's what we should celebrate, right? That in that relentless progress, you hop on the train you're happy to be on. And there's no shame in being a 0.1 or a 0.2 kind of person. Let others take the paper cuts if that's not your scene. On the other hand, if you want to see the latest, shiniest, greatest stuff, it's right there for you too.
And is it still the case that it's roughly 20 times the number of people using the LTSs versus the interims?
Yeah. I mean, most people, if they're going to dabble with an interim, it's going to be in a VM or, it's going to be a...
second laptop, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your daily driver has got to get you to work and back, right?
Yeah.
So the safety story is really interesting. The other story that I think is really interesting is raw performance. And, as we've grown, we've got more ability to look at that, do it objectively, and then look at how kind of newer technical capabilities give us the ability to get more, either more performance for a given watt of energy or fewer watts for a given amount of performance.
Yeah.
The energy story, I think, is very important. I think societally, it's something we have to grapple with. And, I'm proud that we'll play our part in that.
Yeah. It does feel a little bit futile with what's going on with the AI, though, doesn't it? Like, you've got these massive data centers just burning energy and, restarting nuclear power plants for it and all of that.
My gut feel is that we're sort of in the steam era of AI, that yes, it is wasteful, but the right response to that is innovation. And the critical thing really is to get the use cases. Like, what are people really going to use AI for? That's what we have to optimize. I'm not convinced that every country needs its own giant supercomputer to compress all of the data in the world into its version of a model, right? That seems wasteful.
Yeah.
But I'm not so concerned about a sort of a short-term delusion. Those tend to pass.
Right. And what do you think about the correction, shall we say, that is seemingly coming with the whole AI thing?
Are you talking market correction?
Well, I'm talking about the bubble bursting, basically.
Yeah, I feel very definitely we're in a delirious state of optimism about the immediate prospects for a financial return on all the investment that's happening.
Yeah.
There are folks who believe that, we'll cross some threshold and then it's AGI.
Yeah.
And game over for anybody who didn't get there first, kind of thing.
You sound skeptical of that.
That's not my view.
Yeah.
But you've seen Terminator, the robot's eyes are all orange. So
yeah. But
we'll be fine.
It seems to me that is part of the hype cycle, just to get more investment, trying to say that it's going to get to AGI and everything. And a lot of the media, the BBC and stuff like that, have kind of bought that line, seemingly, that we're heading towards a future of computers being smarter than people. And I look at the models we've got, and they're nowhere near that.
That's true, but exponential growth is something that we struggle with. You know what I mean? You look at something that doesn't seem to be moving that fast, but then you look at it a little bit later, and suddenly it's radical. So exponential growth is a difficult thing mentally to grapple with. I can think all the way back to people suddenly saying, "Oh wow, suddenly everyone got an email address." It felt like in the space of 2 years, suddenly everyone got an email address. But actually, email had been around for 15 years.
Yeah.
And exponential growth suddenly just clocked into that mode where everybody you knew got an email address. And many of us would have experienced multiple kind of shifts like that, where suddenly everything seemed to be different. If you were following that all the way from the beginning, it wasn't sudden at all. Stuff takes time to percolate and spread and percolate and spread, and then suddenly it is everywhere. RISC-V is going to be exactly the same. You know what I mean? It will. Some people will say, "Oh, RISC-V came out of nowhere, and now it's everywhere." Right?
Yeah.
Well, in fact, it's been around for a long time already.
Yeah, it's like that showbiz thing. It takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we are going to get into extraordinary territory with AI. So I'm not hesitant at all to do the self-driving cars. And in fact, all work is going to change. That feels absolutely correct to me. But the question is, what are the economics going to end up being like? And if you think back to the early days in the web, we had this huge bubble, and it was very similar. It's like, well, if you're pets.com, then surely you're going to make all the money that there is to be made out of pets. Well, that sounds terrible, but people were throwing money at that sort of stuff, right? And what a crock! It turned out that actually it was all about advertising for 20 years, and advertising is an ancient thing, driving awareness of what you're up to. So I think the interesting question with AI is going to be more like, well, what's the deep business model of all of that takes investment out of the speculative, or sustains investment beyond the speculative era that we're in now into something that you can kind of bank on.
But it's going to take a lot of people losing a lot of money before we get there, probably.
Yes, and those kind of crashes are very unpleasant for lots of people, some of whom didn't go gambling on AI stocks. I think that's true. That's also life, You look left and right before you cross the road.
Yeah. Well, it's been absolutely great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Lovely to speak.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when we'll be talking about what we learnt at the Ubuntu Summit. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.